At this point, I'm sure you're frustrated with using these basketball files constantly, so this is our last assignment related to the basketball files. Again, we enable our content and we address our queries. We're first asked, what are the total number of points scored by each player? Call the query homework 7b-1. So we create query design. We need our participations and our players tables. We will show our player ID. We will then create a calculated field of player total. Player total, I did not put a space between player or total here. Bracket points, close bracket. We're taking this from our participation table of points, and we show. We then take player last name from players and show that. We then take player ID from participations, which we have already done. So we highlight our column here and delete columns in case we ever make a mistake. We next need to select our totals from here to get our totals row. For our player ID, group by is correct. For our calculated total of player total, we need sum instead of group by. For our player last name, group by is correct. We run our query and we notice for each player, it produces their total. We save our query as homework 7b-1 as instructed. We're next asked, what are the total number of points scored by each team? It says do not use the games table. So we create query design. We use the participations, players, and teams tables instead. We take team ID from players. We then create a calculated field of team total. Again, no space here between team and total. We have brackets, points, brackets. From our participations table, we have taken points. We show this. We now need team name from teams. We show that as well. We again need our totals row. Team ID group by, team total points. We select sum again, and team name is group by. When we run, we now see the total for all of the teams. We save as homework 7b-2 as instructed. We're next asked for each player, display the player ID, player last name, and the total points scored by the player's team. Call the query homework 7b-3. So we need to create some relationships. So we click Database Tools, Relationships, Add Tables. We need to select Players from the Tables tab. And then we need to go to the Queries tab and select our Homework 7B-2 that we just created. We need to scroll down to Players to select Team ID, force it over to our Team ID in our just created query, and we click Create to make that relationship. We close out our relationships. Make sure you select Yes to save that relationship. We now create query design. We select Players from our Tables tab, and I'm sure, as you imagined, we select Homework 7B-2 from our Queries tab. We need to have Player ID from Players, which we show, Player Last Name from Players, which we show, and Team Total from our query, which we show. We run, and every player on a specific team will have the exact same amount of their team's total. We save this query as Homework 7B-3 as instructed. We are next asked for each player display the player ID, player last name, total points scored by the player, total points scored by the player's team, and the percentage of points scored by the player for his team. So we create query design. We need players from our tables list. And from our queries list, we need our first created query and our second created query. We show our player ID from players. We show our player last name from players. We take our player total from our first query. We take our team total from our second query. And now we need to create a calculated field. So I did percentage of points, all one word, colon, bracket, player total, close bracket. Make sure it's spelled exactly the same as you have it from your first query, divided by bracket team total, close bracket. Make sure you have it typed exactly as you did in your second query. We need to format this. So we select our property sheet. We format as percent. You'll notice our format is percent. We run our query. You'll notice that Brands scored 7.39% of his team's points. We then save our query as Homework 7B-4 as instructed. For our last query, we're asked to create a query that will display for each team the team name, number of wins, number of losses, and winning percentages. Call the query Homework 7B-6. Here, we need to do some work before we can even make that query. So we need to create query design. We select our games table. We then select losing team ID, but we need to create 2 instances of losing team ID. You'll see why momentarily. We then make sure that we have our totals row. Our first instance of losing team ID is going to be grouped by. Our second instance is going to count. We're counting the number of instances here. We then run, and we notice for each of our 10 teams, we have a count of their losses. We save this query as homework 7B-losses. We now need to create a query for our wins. Create query design. We again use our games table. This time we have winning team ID with 2 instances. Again, we add our totals row. Just like last time, we do group by and count. We run our query. We have the number of wins for those teams. We save this query as homework 7B-wins. We now need to relate some things. So we go to Database Tools, Relationships. We need to add tables. So we add our teams table, and then we add our wins and losses table. You'll notice here the teams is already set up for us. So we can click Teams 1 and hide table. So here we want to connect our team ID from teams with our losing ID from losses. We click Create. We've now created that relationship. We do the same with wins. Our team ID from teams connects with our winning team ID from wins. We create. Make sure when you close out your relationships, you save them. Now we can finally do our query 7B-6. We create query design. We need our teams table. And from queries, we need our recently created losses and wins queries to help us out. We take our team ID from teams, our team name from teams, and show them. We take our count of winning team ID from our wins and our count of losing team from losses. We show both of them as well. We then need to create a calculated field. I did win percentage colon. You then need to type in homework 7B-wins within the brackets, close bracket, semicolon, exclamation point. You do Shift 1. Then we have another bracket, and you type in count of winning underscore team underscore ID exactly as it is laid out in the wings query. Close bracket, and then we divide this by 9 because there are 9 games played. We then run this query, and because I misspelled the word of, we're asked to enter parameter value. So click back in, and I'll change the P to an O, and now when I run, it will work properly. You'll notice win percentage gives us a bunch of number signs. So we go back into design view, we click our win percentage, we click property sheet, and we change our format to %. We close, we run again, and now our win percentage is in percentage. We then save our query as homework 7B-6 as instructed. We then close out all of our queries, close out our database, and submit.